The first sound I remember was my father tapping a silver spoon against his champagne glass. The sharp little chime cut through the wedding band, and 200 guests turned toward him beneath the amber lights of the old textile mill. White roses crowded every table. Their perfume was so thick it sat at the back of my throat, sweet and stale at the same time. Under my fingertips, the edge of the folder felt hard enough to draw blood. Dad lifted his glass toward my sister. To Briar, the daughter who knows how to build something. A beautiful wedding, a brilliant career, and a future worthy of the Calloway name. Briar smiled beside her new husband, one hand resting over the diamonds at her throat. The room answered with warm applause. Then Dad turned his glass toward me. And to her unemployed sister, he said, who at least managed to arrive on time. The laughter came in scattered bursts. Some guests laughed because they thought it was a family joke. Others knew enough about my father to laugh before checking whether anything was funny. My mother lowered her eyes to the tablecloth. Grant stopped smiling, though he still had no idea why I was there. I checked the clock above the bar, 4:50 in the afternoon. 10 minutes remained before the deadline. Without answering Dad, I placed the folder beside his champagne and laid a black fountain pen across the cover. He gave me the patient smile he used with people he considered harmless, then opened the folder while the guests were still chuckling. The smile stayed through the first page and weakened on the second. By the time he reached the signature page, the glass in his other hand had begun to tilt. His fingers stopped moving. "This was you?" Dad asked. I reached across the table and took back the pen. "Not anymore. Before I tell you how my father lost an $80 million deal 5 minutes after calling me unemployed, I hope you are doing well. Stay with me, because the truth began months before that wedding, and please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what happened next." 8 months earlier, I still had an office at ClearPath Recovery and a brass plate on the door that read Chief Compliance Officer. Monday mornings usually began with insurer questions. Most were dull, and dull was good. A missing modifier. A date typed into the wrong field. A counselor who had forgotten to close a note before midnight. Small mistakes happened in every healthcare company, especially one spread across 9 treatment centers in 2 states. That morning, a routine query from an insurance company landed in my inbox before I finished my coffee. The air conditioning rattled above me, fighting the June heat outside, while the bitter smell of burnt office coffee drifted in from the break room. I opened the attached claim and saw nothing remarkable until I compared it with the weekly staffing report. Leah Mercer, one of our licensed counselors, had been billed as leading a group therapy session in Charlotte at 10 on Thursday morning. The same claim system showed her leading another group in Rock Hill at 10:15. Those facilities sat more than an hour apart on a good day. A person could forget a code. A person could not divide herself between 2 buildings. I pulled the original schedule, then requested the badge entry report and correction history. While the files loaded, I called Leah at the Charlotte Center. "Were you in Rock Hill last Thursday?" I asked. "No," Leah said. Her voice carried the hollow echo of a hallway. "I have not covered Rock Hill since March. Why?" "Your name appears on a group note there." Silence settled on the line, followed by the muffled click of a door closing. "I did not sign that note," Leah said more quietly. "Tessa, I was in Charlotte all day. You can ask anyone here." "I will," I said. "Do not discuss this with the billing team yet. I need to see where the entry came from." When the badge report arrived, it placed Leah in Charlotte from 8:12 that morning until 5:46 that evening. The correction history showed that someone had reopened a blank group template 2 days later, added Leah's electronic signature, and submitted the claim. I sent the record to Martin Cole, the regional operations manager, and asked for an explanation. He called within 3 minutes. "It is a template issue," Martin said. "Rock Hill was behind on documentation, so someone must have copied the wrong provider." "Who actually led the group?" "I will have to check." "How many patients attended?" Another pause. "I will have to check that too." "Then do not call it a template issue until you know there was a group." Martin exhaled into the phone. "You always make these things sound worse than they are. Send me the room schedule, staff roster, and patient count by noon." He muttered that he had meetings, but I ended the call before the conversation could turn into a debate about my personality. Numbers did not care whether I was pleasant. They either matched or they did not. By lunch, Martin had sent only the room schedule. The largest group room in Rock Hill held 12 people. The claim listed 17. That was when the first discrepancy stopped looking small. I expanded the search to 6 weeks of group therapy claims. A second duplicate appeared at our Gastonia Center, then a third in Columbia. Different counselors, different dates, same pattern. A clinician was listed in one location, while badge records placed that person somewhere else. Several sessions had more patients than the assigned rooms could hold. The claims were not random. Someone had learned where the system looked and where it did not. I printed the first 3 pages and walked toward my father's office. ClearPath's headquarters occupied a renovated brick building south of uptown Charlotte, with glass conference rooms and polished concrete floors meant to suggest honesty, efficiency, and expensive restraint. The hallway outside the executive suite held framed photographs from the company's first 20 years. One picture showed Dad opening the original ClearPath Center in a converted medical office. He looked younger and leaner, one hand resting on the shoulder of a former patient who had agreed to speak at the ceremony. Another photo showed my Uncle Daniel, Dad's younger brother, smiling beside a fishing boat 2 years before an overdose killed him. Dad had built ClearPath because of Daniel. That part was true. In the early years, he took calls after midnight, drove frightened parents to detox centers, and mortgaged our house when the first facility nearly failed. I had watched him help people who had nowhere else to go. That history made it harder to recognize what the company had become. As I reached his office, Dad came around the corner with a group of donors. He rested a hand on my shoulder and introduced me as the person who kept everyone honest, earning a polite laugh from the group. "You should hear her when a comma is out of place," he said. "A comma cannot create a false claim," I replied. The donors laughed again, but Dad's thumb pressed once against my shoulder before he released me. "Come see me at 4, he said. "Breyer will be there." At 3:58, I carried my reports into his office. Breyer sat near the window in a cream suit, scrolling through her phone while Dad finished a call. 7 years younger than me, she had always possessed the social ease I lacked. She remembered birthdays, chose the right wine, and could make investors feel clever without correcting them. I set the reports on the table between us. "What is this?" Breyer asked. "Claims billed for sessions that could not have happened as documented." She skimmed the first page, then leaned back. "Martin said it was a template problem. Martin does not know who led the group or how many patients attended. So we correct the provider name. We do not know that there was a session to correct." Breyer's lips tightened. "You always do this. You find one bad entry and talk as if federal agents are already in the parking lot. Numbers do not become harmless because you call them flexible." The words came out sharper than they needed to. Breyer looked toward Dad, and for a second I saw the old pattern between us. I brought facts. She brought the wound those facts opened. Dad decided which one mattered. He ended his call and sat at the head of the table. "ClearPath is entering a sensitive period," Dad said. "There may be a strategic opportunity, and uncertainty in the compliance file could slow things down." "What kind of opportunity?" I asked. "Nothing ready for discussion. I need a preliminary certification by Friday stating that we have no undisclosed material compliance problems. You just heard that I found claims we cannot support. I heard that operations used the wrong templates. You heard Breyer repeat Martin's guess." Dad opened his desk drawer and removed a black fountain pen. The gold lettering along the barrel had faded where my fingers used to rest. He had given me that pen 4 years earlier, on the day he promoted me. One line was engraved along the side. "Do the right thing, even when it costs us." Dad placed it on top of the certification. "Your uncle did not die so that we could let paperwork shut down treatment beds," he said. "Your grandmother did not help me build this company so one coding mistake could frighten us out of an opportunity. This is not one coding mistake." "Then find out what it is," Dad replied, quietly. "Sign the preliminary certification and amend it later if necessary." I picked up the report, but not the pen. "A certification is not preliminary to the person signing it," I said. "I will give you an answer when the data supports one." Breyer looked away toward the window. Dad's face remained calm, though the muscle beside his jaw tightened. "You have until Friday," he said. Back in my office, I searched the remaining claims. By 7:30, the cleaning crew had started emptying trash cans along the hallway, and the city lights had replaced the afternoon glare on my windows. Duplicate provider names appeared in 3 facilities across 6 weeks. The same correction codes repeated. Sessions exceeded room limits. Each time, the claim had been reopened after the original service date. At 8:11, an email from Dad appeared. Breyer was copied. I need the variance gone and the certification signed by Friday. The fountain pen rested beside my keyboard where Dad had left it. I turned it once between my fingers, read the engraved words, and closed the cap without signing anything. By the next morning, my father's email had stopped looking like a careless choice of words. I saved the message in 3 places, printed a copy, and wrote the time received across the top. Then I opened a new review file and widened the claim sample from 6 weeks to 6 months. If the duplicate session had been a clerical mistake, a larger sample would bury it among hundreds of clean claims. If it was not, the pattern would have room to show itself. By 10 that morning, my office floor was covered with neat stacks of paper. Staffing schedules went near the window. Badge reports sat beside the filing cabinet. Claim summaries formed a 3rd row along the wall, each marked with a removable tab so no patient name remained visible from the doorway. The problem grew faster than I could label it. Our Rock Hill facility had 1 group room approved for 12 patients, yet 3 claims listed groups of 16 or 17. Columbia showed 2 counselors leading separate sessions during hours when payroll records placed both women in mandatory training across town. In Gastonia, a therapist had supposedly conducted more than 11 hours of group and individual treatment during an 8-hour shift. At first, I looked for ordinary explanations. Late notes, corrected provider names, sessions that had moved to larger rooms without the schedule being updated. Every treatment center had paperwork lag, and no one needed me turning a messy Tuesday into an accusation. Then I found the same correction code on 38 claims. The code had been entered after the service dates, usually late in the evening, and almost always by someone with elevated access. It did not identify the person who had provided treatment. It only replaced the blank space with the name of an available counselor. I called Leah again. Have supervisors ever asked you to sign notes for groups you did not personally lead? I asked. A cart squeaked past her end of the line, followed by the rattle of plastic cups. They have asked me to finish notes after my shift, Leah said. Sometimes the group was run by a tech because a counselor called out, "Did you review what happened in those sessions before signing?" Usually. The word landed wrong. What does usually mean? I asked. Leah lowered her voice. It means sometimes the census was high. Everyone was exhausted. And Martin said the care had happened even if the right person had not entered it. He called it catching up. Did he ever give you a prepared note? Yes. How often? I do not know. A few times. I rested my hand on the desk, letting the cool wood press into my palm. Do not delete anything. Keep your schedules, texts, and any notes you received from management. Tessa, am I in trouble? Not for answering my questions. What about the company? That was the question no one wanted to ask aloud. I looked through the glass wall of my office at the photograph hanging across the corridor. The one of Dad cutting the ribbon at our first center. I'm still trying to find out, I said. By the 2nd week of July, the number of questionable claims had passed 100. The sessions could not all have happened as documented because the buildings lacked the rooms, the staff, and in some cases the hours required to provide them. I built a timeline across the whiteboard behind my desk. Counselor schedules ran in blue. Badge entries were green. Claim submission times went in black. Red circles marked every physical impossibility. The board did not need a lecture about billing rules. They needed to see that a woman could not stand in 2 cities at once, that 17 people could not fit into a room approved for 12, and that a counselor could not deliver 11 hours of treatment during an 8-hour shift. I believed the facts would do the rest. That belief cost me more than I knew at the time. Near the end of July, I called Adrian Wells, an attorney whose firm had handled compliance and employment matters for several healthcare companies in Charlotte. We had met twice at professional conferences, where he had spoken with the careful precision of a man who expected every sentence to appear in a deposition later. I need advice before I expand an internal review, I told him. Does the review involve your employer or your family? Adrian asked. Both. A soft click came through the phone, probably a pen opening. Then you needed advice before you began it. I began with a routine insurer question. And now? Now I have claims that do not match staffing, room capacity, or badge access. Adrian was quiet for several seconds. Do not send me patient records. Start with policies, de-identified claim examples, corporate communications, and your own work product. If a patient wants to provide records, that person must do so voluntarily and in writing. 2 days later, his office forwarded a limited consent signed by a former patient named Monica Hale. She had requested help after receiving a bill she did not understand. Adrian removed her address and identifying numbers before sending me the working copy. The statement listed 6 group sessions on a single Tuesday. Monica remembered attending 2. Her insurer had denied part of the claim after requesting more documentation, leaving her with a balance of more than $2,400. ClearPath's billing office had told her the charge was valid and warned that the account could be sent to collections. I read the letter Monica had included with her consent. I went to ClearPath because my children wanted their mother back. I did what the counselors asked. I attended every session on my schedule. I do not understand why I'm being charged for treatment I never received. The numbers on my whiteboard had been clean and orderly. Monica's handwriting was not. The words slanted down the page, then rose again near the end, as if she had stopped caring whether the lines stayed straight. I called billing and placed a hold on the collection notice. Then I added her claim to the board package without her name. The following Monday, I presented my findings in the executive conference room. Dad sat at the head of the table. Breyer took the chair beside him, while Martin Cole and our chief financial officer sat across from me. Through the windows, summer rain darkened the brick courtyard and drummed against the metal awning below. I handed everyone the summary. We have at least 112 claims that cannot be supported as documented, I said. The problems include duplicate provider locations, patient counts above room capacity, services beyond available staffing hours, and notes signed by counselors who were not present. Martin shifted in his chair. You are using badge logs as if people never hold doors open for each other. One badge log might be wrong, I said. Payroll, room schedules, counselor statements, and claim timestamps do not all become wrong in the same direction by accident. Breyer turned to the page showing the group sessions. The patients were still there. They still received care. Documentation was late because we were short-staffed. Who provided the care? Techs, counselors, whoever was available. Then the claim must identify what was actually provided and by whom. Breyer's nails tapped once against the paper. You are acting as if no treatment happened. I am saying we cannot bill for licensed therapy when we cannot prove licensed therapy occurred. Dad leaned back. What happens if we report every questionable claim today? We work with counsel, notify the affected payers, calculate repayment, and stop using unsupported templates while the review continues. That was not my question. The rain struck harder against the windows. Our chief financial officer cleared his throat. A broad payer disclosure could trigger immediate sampling and recoupment. Depending on how far they extrapolate, cash could become tight. How tight? Dad asked. The chief financial officer glanced at me before answering. 2 facilities could have trouble meeting payroll within 6 weeks. Breyer folded her arms. That is what I have been trying to tell her. Dad looked around the table, then rested both hands on the report. The people working in those centers have mortgages. Their children need health insurance. Our patients cannot be dropped in the middle of treatment because a form was signed 2 days late. A late form is not the only issue, I said. But closing beds will be the result if you handle this badly. No one in the room could dismiss that possibility. ClearPath had expanded too quickly, buying 3 centers in less than 2 years and renovating another with borrowed money. Revenue came in every month, but so did lender payments, payroll, food costs, transportation contracts, insurance premiums, and pharmacy bills. Dad had placed the company on a narrow bridge, then told us looking down would make us fall. We can freeze expansion, I said. Pause distributions, suspend questionable billing, negotiate repayment over time, and bring in an outside reviewer. That protects the centers without signing a false certification. Breyer gave a humorless laugh. You say pause distributions as if no one made commitments based on those numbers. What commitments? Recruitment packages, renovations, vendor contracts. Then we disclose those too. Her chair scraped backward. For once, listen to how you sound. You would rather bury us in corrections than admit operations sometimes has to move faster than your department. Operations does not get to invent treatment. Dad raised one hand. Enough. The meeting ended without a decision. Martin was told to produce complete staffing records. The chief financial officer had to model repayment scenarios. I was ordered to finish my review by the middle of August. Breyer followed me into the hallway. You have never had to stand in front of 60 employees and tell them their paychecks might not clear, she said. The conference room door clicked shut behind us. And you have never had to sign your name to something you know is false, I replied. That is always your answer. Your name, your standards, your rules. They are not my rules. No, Tessa, they are your weapon. A pair of nurses walked past us. And Breyer waited until they turned the corner. You corrected me at every dinner we ever had, she continued. How I pronounced a word, which college statistic I got wrong, what Dad meant when I misunderstood him. You never had to call me stupid because you found quieter ways to do it. The accusation caught me off guard, though I did not let it change my face. This is not about childhood, I said. It is always about childhood with you. You just bring spreadsheets now. I should have answered differently. I could have told her that I remembered those dinners too, and that correcting her had often been easier than admitting how much I resented Dad for laughing when I did it. I could have said that being right did not give me permission to make my sister feel small. Instead, I shifted the folder under my arm. If you want to discuss our childhood, choose another time. Right now, we have unsupported claims. Breyer studied me for a moment. The hurt in her face flattened into something harder. You really do think data excuses everything, she said. Then she walked away. A week later, Dad sent an email to Breyer and me with the subject line, Variance Review. Make the variance disappear before due diligence sees it. I read the sentence twice. Breyer replied 20 minutes later. I will clean the vendor side and reroute the support expenses. The vendor tracker already separates what operations needs from what compliance expects to see. Her reply came to me only because Dad had kept me copied on the original thread. Whether she noticed my name or not, I could not tell. I searched the shared drive for vendor tracker. Nothing appeared. Next, I checked the approved vendor list and sorted it by creation date. One company had been added 3 months earlier under the name Renewal Family Outreach. Its contract described weekend education programs for patients and relatives, transportation support, and post-discharge workshops. The description sounded reasonable. The file beneath it did not. There were no employee rosters, no facility reservations, no workshop calendars, no attendance sheets. The address belonged to a residential property outside Charlotte, and the invoices used the same rounded amounts month after month, $25,000. $30,000. Another $25,000. I sent a document request to operations and copied Breyer. She answered within minutes. Renewal handles flexible outreach services. Records are being organized. What services? I wrote back. Her reply contained only one sentence. I will discuss it with Dad. By then, the deadline for the certification had been moved twice. Dad called me into his office in the middle of August and placed a revised version on the desk. The fountain pen lay beside it. This language came from Transaction Counsel, he said. It confirms there are no undisclosed material compliance matters that would affect the proposed deal. There are undisclosed compliance matters. We are addressing them internally. Addressing them does not make them disappear. Dad pushed the document closer. The buyer is not acquiring perfection. They are acquiring a functioning company. I read the certification from beginning to end. One paragraph required me to confirm that all known billing concerns had been corrected and that no current practice could lead to a repayment demand, licensing action, or material claim. I drew a line through the paragraph. I can certify that an internal review is underway, I said. I can describe the claim sample and our proposed repayment process. I cannot certify that the issue is closed. His gaze settled on the line I had struck out. That wording will invite them to walk. Then they should decide with accurate information. You think truth is a brick you can drop on a table and walk away from. It is not. People lose jobs while you protect your conscience. My conscience is not the issue. It is always the issue with you. Dad picked up the pen and held it out. I did not take it. A date appeared at the top of the certification, showing it had supposedly been prepared several days earlier. The PDF properties on the laptop beside me showed the file had been created late the previous night. The mismatch could have been innocent. Transaction documents changed constantly, and someone might have reused an earlier date. Still, I wrote down the file name and creation time before closing the screen. "I will send my reasons in writing," I said. Dad placed the pen on the desk with more care than the moment deserved. "You are putting 9 centers at risk." "No. Whoever created unsupported claims did that." His chair creaked as he leaned forward. "Do not mistake your title for ownership, Tessa." I left without signing. From my office, I emailed Dad, Breyer, the chief financial officer, and our general counsel. I listed the unresolved claim discrepancies, the missing renewal records, the unsupported certification language, and the steps required before I could sign anything. Then I saved the message with the earlier correspondence. At 6:15, most of the building had emptied. I opened the vendor directory and tried to access Renewal Family Outreach's payment file. A red banner appeared across the screen. "Access denied." I tried again through the accounting archive. The system rejected my password, then sent an automatic notice to my phone. "Your credential has been reset at executive request." I had not requested a reset. I had not authorized one, and no one from information technology had contacted me. The office lights hummed above the empty hallway while the message remained on my screen. Someone had not merely blocked me from a file. Someone had begun using my name. The next morning, NetAccess told me an emergency reset request had come from ClearPath's executive office. The technician on the phone would not name the person who submitted it. He said the request had been marked urgent, approved under delegated authority, and attached to an internal ticket I was not permitted to see. "I am the account holder," I said. "Why can't I see a request made in my name?" "You'll need authorization from your administrator," the technician replied. "My administrator requested the reset." "I understand." "No, you understand the circle. I'm the one trapped inside it." After 20 minutes, NetAccess restored my access through a replacement token and promised to preserve the ticket. I wrote down the technician's name, the call time, and the ticket number he accidentally mentioned before correcting himself. Then I emailed our general counsel, Human Resources, and Dad, asking who had ordered the reset. Dad answered first. "Routine security maintenance. Focus on completing your review." Breyer did not answer at all. 2 weeks later, ClearPath sent me to Raleigh for a healthcare compliance conference. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about internal reporting systems, which would have been funny if I had found any of this funny. The panel began at 1:30 on a Thursday afternoon. My badge was scanned at the ballroom entrance, the hotel had charged my parking account shortly before noon, and a recording crew streamed the session for remote attendees. More than 100 people watched me sit beneath a blue conference banner, while the moderator asked what companies should do when employees raised concerns about billing. "Preserve the records before deciding who is right," I said into the microphone. "A review that begins with a conclusion is not a review." My phone vibrated inside my bag at 2:16. I ignored it until the moderator invited questions from the audience. When another panelist began answering, I glanced down and saw an automated ClearPath alert. A transfer from the Patient Support Fund had been approved under my credential at 2:14. The amount was just under $40,000. For several seconds, the voices around me blurred into the soft hum of the ballroom speakers. I kept my hands flat on the table because the camera was still running. The moderator turned toward me, and I answered the next question without remembering a word of what I said. At 2:30, the session ended. I walked into the corridor, called our finance office, and asked where the approval originated. "Executive Workstation 4, the analyst said. "Which building?" "Headquarters. Charlotte." I was standing in Raleigh, nearly 3 hours away by car, with a badge scan, a hotel receipt, a parking record, and a public recording proving where I had been when someone used my name. "Freeze the transfer," I said. "I can't reverse an approved transaction without executive authorization." "Then call the chief financial officer. He's in a lender meeting." "Call him anyway." The analyst lowered her voice. "Tessa, the transfer has your approval. That is why you need to freeze it." I emailed the chief financial officer, general counsel, Dad, Breyer, and Human Resources before leaving the hallway. My message included the exact transaction time, my location, and a request to preserve the workstation log, authentication records, camera footage from headquarters, and every communication related to the transfer. Dad replied 23 minutes later. We will address this when you return. Do not create unnecessary alarm. I read the sentence beside a hotel window while afternoon traffic moved along Fayetteville Street below. His answer did not ask whether my credential had been stolen. It did not ask whether the money was safe. He was worried about the alarm. The drive back to Charlotte took almost 3 hours. By the time I reached headquarters the following morning, my access badge flashed red against the reader. I tried it again. The lock remained closed. A security guard I had known for 6 years stepped out from behind the desk. Miss Calloway, Human Resources, asked me to direct you to Conference Room 3. Am I permitted to enter the building? His gaze shifted toward the camera above the doors. They said someone would meet you here. Human Resources Director Janice Bell arrived with our general counsel. Neither woman offered a handshake. Janice carried a thin folder against her chest and asked the guard to let us into the conference wing. Dad was already seated inside. A paper cup of coffee stood near his hand, untouched. Breyer was not there. Janice waited until the door closed. Tessa, ClearPath is placing you on paid administrative leave while we review several unauthorized transfers from the Patient Support Fund. Several? There are 4 transactions currently under review. Give me the dates, amounts, approval records, and the written allegation. Our investigation is ongoing. You locked me out before interviewing me. Dad folded his hands. This is not a courtroom. No, it is an employment action involving transactions someone approved in my name. I want the allegation in writing. Janice slid the folder across the table. Inside was a 2-page leave notice stating that I posed a possible risk to company records. It required me to surrender all ClearPath property and preserve company information. The last page included an authorization allowing the company to examine any personal device used for work. I placed the page back on the table. I'll return company equipment after my attorney reviews the inventory, I said. You do not have permission to search my personal phone. General Counsel leaned forward. If you used it to access company systems, relevant information may be discoverable. Then send a lawful request identifying what you seek. I am not signing a blanket authorization. Dad's coffee cup made a faint scraping sound as he moved it aside. Tessa, cooperate, he said. You are making this harder than it needs to be. Preserve the net access ticket. Authentication archive, workstation logs, email records, building access data, and every version of the vendor file. Janice looked toward General Counsel. Put that request in writing, the attorney said. I already did yesterday. I will send it again through counsel. Dad's expression changed at the last word. Not much, but enough. The soft concern disappeared from his voice. You called a lawyer before speaking to your family? Someone used my credential while I was on a recorded stage in Raleigh. You do not know that. I know I was not in Charlotte. The transaction may have been scheduled earlier. Then the log will show it. For the first time since I entered the room, no one answered. Janice collected the unsigned device authorization and told me security would escort me to my office for personal belongings. I took my purse, a framed photograph of my grandmother, and the black fountain pen from my desk. Company files stayed where they were. Before leaving, I photographed the empty drawers and the equipment I returned, then emailed the images to myself from the lobby. Dad had once told me innocent people did not need to document every step. By then, I knew innocent people were often the only ones who did. That evening, Mom asked me to come to the house. I almost refused, but her voice sounded thin over the phone. She said Dad and Breyer wanted to discuss a private resolution before lawyers made everything worse. When I arrived, Breyer was sitting on the living room sofa with a tissue crumpled in one hand. Her eyes were red, though her makeup remained untouched. Dad stood near the fireplace, while Mom kept rearranging coasters on the coffee table. I defended you, Breyer said before I had taken off my coat. Against what? People have been asking questions for months. I told Dad you were stressed, that you were not trying to damage the company. I reported billing discrepancies. You created a crisis around them. Dad pointed toward an armchair. Sit down. I'll stand. His mouth tightened. Breyer pressed the tissue beneath one eye without disturbing the mascara. There is money missing, she said, money meant for patients who cannot afford treatment, and someone approved those transfers using my credential. Your credential, Breyer repeated. Your access. Your department. Mom stopped touching the coasters. Tessa, if there is an explanation, please give us one. I was in Raleigh when the latest transfer occurred. Dad stepped closer to the coffee table. We are trying to keep this from becoming criminal. The room went still around that word. If you return the money and resign quietly, he continued. I will not ask the company to refer this to law enforcement. Return money I did not take? Do not force me to choose between my daughter and hundreds of patients. Breyer's breath caught in a small practiced sob. He is offering to protect you. Dad placed a document on the coffee table. It was labeled Separation and Confidential Resolution Agreement. The first paragraph said I disputed the company's findings. The third required repayment of an amount to be determined. Farther down, I would have acknowledged responsibility for failures within my department and agreed not to challenge ClearPath's description of my departure. They had left enough ambiguity to avoid writing the word theft. They had included enough language to make everyone assume it. I closed the agreement. This is not a resolution, I said. It is a confession with softer verbs. Mom sank into the chair beside the sofa. Can't we settle this privately? You are asking me to repay stolen money and let them say I was responsible. Dad's voice dropped. I am giving you a way out. No, you are giving yourselves one. Breyer stood so quickly the tissue fell to the rug. After everything this family has given you, you are going to drag us through an investigation? You used my name. We do not know that. I know I did not approve those transfers. You always know, she said. That is the problem. You walk into every room certain that everyone else must be wrong. There was truth buried inside the insult. I had spent years believing facts only needed to be placed in the right order. Once people saw them, I thought, honest conclusions would follow. But no one in that living room wanted a conclusion. They wanted my signature. I pushed the agreement back toward Dad. Future communication goes through my attorney. Mom whispered my name. I picked up my coat. Do not call me to discuss the investigation. Do not destroy, revise, or remove any record related to my access or the patient support fund. Dad stared at me across the coffee table. Think carefully before you leave. I already did. From the driveway, I called Adrian. He answered on the second ring. Are you safe? I am outside my parents' house. Did you sign anything? No. Did you take company records after they suspended you? No. Good, do not log into ClearPath again, even if your access starts working. Do not contact information technology yourself. Send me the leave notice and the agreement. I photographed every page under the porch light and forwarded the images. Adrian called back 15 minutes later. This repayment clause is a problem, he said. They want money returned without identifying where it went, and they want you to accept responsibility for department failures before they complete the review. They said they were protecting me from the police. That statement needs to go in your notes tonight. Exact words, who was present, and the time. What can we do? Send a formal preservation letter. Demand the original authentication records from NetAccess. Prepare for a retaliation claim. And Tessa, listen carefully. Your Raleigh alibi proves you were not sitting at that workstation. It does not yet prove who was. The distinction mattered. Breyer could say someone else had used my office. Dad could claim a system error. ClearPath could argue that I had delegated access before leaving town. I had proof of absence, not proof of authorship. By Monday, Adrian's preservation letter had gone to ClearPath, NetAccess, the board, and transaction counsel. It identified the reset ticket, the 4 transfers, the Raleigh timestamp, the executive workstation, and the missing renewal records. My family answered in a different way. An aunt called and asked whether I had a gambling problem. A cousin sent a message saying everyone made mistakes, and Dad was trying to spare me public embarrassment. 2 former ClearPath employees contacted me to say Vincent had described my leave as a personal crisis caused by disappointment over succession planning. Breyer sent a group text to several relatives. We are heartbroken. Tessa is going through something serious, and Dad is doing everything possible to keep this private. Please do not contact the media or discuss company matters online. No one had contacted the media. Her warning planted the idea before anyone asked the question. I did not answer the group text. Adrian had warned me that public accusations could alert whoever controlled the records, and I still believed the audit would move quickly once the board saw the timestamps. Instead, my silence became their favorite evidence. By the end of September, ClearPath terminated me for cause. The letter cited unauthorized fund transfers, failure to cooperate with the internal investigation, and risk of destruction or removal of records. It did not mention that I had requested preservation. It did not mention Raleigh. It did not mention the emergency credential reset. Attached to the letter was a summary already sent to the board. Adrian read the summary at his conference table, then turned back to the first page. When did Human Resources interview you about the first 3 transfers? They never did. They only questioned me after the Raleigh alert. This document says management identified a pattern of concealment before placing you on leave. They did not show me a pattern. The file properties say this summary was created the night before you returned from Raleigh. The paper made a dry sound as he laid it flat. Someone had drafted the story before I entered the conference room. Adrian opened the transaction list and pointed to the smallest transfer, a test payment approved through delegated access several weeks before I found the duplicate claims. At that time, no one could claim I had invented a compliance review to hide missing money. The credential misuse had already begun. It did not prove they had planned to frame me from the start. It proved someone had been testing how easily my authority could be borrowed. Adrian placed the transfer timeline beside the termination timeline and aligned the dates. They did not fire you because they found a thief, he said. They needed a thief before the buyer found them. Adrian filed the first protected disclosure in the second week of October. We sat in his conference room while rain ticked against the windows, and a printer fed out 2 copies of the final package. The submission went to North Carolina Medicaid Program Integrity and the licensing divisions responsible for ClearPath's facilities in both states. A separate notice preserved my retaliation claims against the company. The package did not contain patient charts. Adrian had stripped out names, birth dates, identification numbers, and anything else that could expose a person who had entered treatment expecting privacy. What remained was enough: staffing schedules, badge records, de-identified claim samples, the email ordering me to make the variants disappear, and the termination summary created before anyone had interviewed me. Once this leaves my office, you do not control the pace, Adrian said. I understand the consequence. You understand the sentence. They may ask questions next week, or they may spend months comparing records before anyone contacts ClearPath. I looked at the signature line beneath my statement. And while they do that, my father tells everyone I stole from patients. He can tell any story he wants. Our job is to build one he cannot survive under oath. I signed my statement and handed it back to him. The pen I used came from a plastic cup near the printer. Dad's fountain pen stayed in my purse. The first month after ClearPath fired me was not dramatic. No sheriff appeared at my door. No newspaper printed my name. I paid rent, elected continuation health coverage with my own money, canceled a vacation I had planned for spring, and reduced my retirement contributions to the lowest amount that still made sense. My severance was 0 because ClearPath had terminated me for cause. Adrian's bills arrived in careful 6-minute increments, each line polite and expensive. I had savings, but savings changed shape once there was no salary replacing them. Every weekday morning, I dressed for work anyway. I converted the second bedroom of my apartment into an office and registered a small consulting company under my own name. There was no secret investor, no hidden fortune, and no miraculous contract waiting for me. I sent 32 messages to former colleagues. 21 went unanswered. 6 people replied with some version of, "I have always respected you, but the timing is difficult." The first person who hired me was Dr. Evelyn Price, who ran 3 outpatient behavioral health clinics outside Greensboro. She needed a review of her employee onboarding process before an insurer audit. On my second day, I found that the clinics verified professional licenses when employees were hired but did not check them again after renewal dates. One counselor's license had expired 6 weeks earlier because a payment notice went to an old address. Dr. Price stared at the spreadsheet, then called the counselor into her office. "We can fix this without turning her into a criminal," she said after the woman left. "That is the idea," I replied. "Stop the billing, correct the affected claims, document what happened, and build a reminder system so it cannot repeat. Dr. Price studied me for a moment. ClearPath said you were impossible to work with. The air from the vent moved a strand of hair across my cheek. ClearPath said many things. Your sister also said you found problems before they got expensive. Breyer called you 2 weeks before you arrived. She had not told Dr. Price not to hire me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, Breyer had warned that I was under investigation and might use client information to defend myself. Dr. Price folded her arms. I hired you because your proposal included a data access restriction before I asked for one. The contract was small, 8 weeks of work at a rate below what I had earned at ClearPath. It paid my insurance, part of Adrian's fees, and enough of the rent that I could breathe without counting every grocery item. By Thanksgiving, I had 2 clients. On the morning of Thursday, November 28th, Mom sent a photograph to the family group chat. The dining room table was set with her white china and the silver candlesticks she used every year. Dal sat at one end. Breyer and Grant sat near the center, shoulder to shoulder beneath a wreath of dried magnolia leaves. My chair sat empty at the far side of the table. Mom's caption read, "Family healing begins with gratitude." Aunt Denise replied with 3 heart symbols. My cousin wrote that he was glad Dad had found the strength to hold everyone together. Then someone asked whether I was still receiving treatment. I typed a response. I am not ill. I was fired after reporting billing discrepancies and unauthorized access to my credential. Before I could send it, another message appeared from Dad. We continue to cover Tessa's health insurance and legal expenses because family does not abandon family, even during difficult seasons. ClearPath had ended my insurance at the close of September. I had paid the first continuation premium myself, along with every legal bill on Adrian's invoices. My thumb hovered over the screen. Adrian answered when I called, though I could hear dishes and several voices in the background. He is lying in writing, I said. Save the message. I want to answer it. You can answer if you choose, but ask what the answer gains. It stops them from turning me into a patient in my own family. For an hour, perhaps. Then Breyer posts concern about your anger, and 15 relatives debate your mental state, while the actual evidence disappears beneath the argument. I walked to my kitchen window. Across the courtyard, someone had hung orange lights along a balcony railing. A television audience cheered from the apartment next door. So I say nothing? You say what serves the case, where it can be verified. Silence is not surrender when you choose it. I took screenshots, exported the conversation, and added Dad's statement to the retaliation file. Then I deleted the response I had written. That afternoon, I ate turkey with Dr. Price and her widowed sister because they had heard I would be alone. No one asked about ClearPath until dessert. The quiet should have felt peaceful. Instead, I kept seeing my empty chair in Mom's photograph, staged like evidence that my absence belonged to them. The truth was losing the room, even if it had not lost the case. 3 days later, Leah called me from her personal phone. I remembered something about your reset, she said. Owen asked me about it before he left. Owen Barrett had been the net access contractor assigned to ClearPath. He was 29, careful to the point of nervousness, and known for leaving meetings with more notes than the people running them. What did he ask? I said. He wanted to know why a closed ticket had been reopened. I thought he meant one of the medication carts. When did he leave? About a week after you were suspended. Adrian found a forwarding address through Owen's former employer and sent a formal request for an interview. No threats were made, and the letter did not suggest Owen had committed a crime. It listed the ticket number, the dates, and a request that he preserve anything he still lawfully possessed. Owen did not answer. A second letter went out and received no answer either. His silence made the obvious story easy to believe. He had reset my token. He had left after the transfers became visible. Maybe Breyer had paid him. Maybe he had used her workstation so the trail would point upward while he moved the money somewhere else. Adrian refused to let me build accusations from absence. People hide because they are guilty, I said. People also hide because they are frightened, ashamed, broke, or advised badly. Which one describes Owen? We do not know yet, Adrian replied. 2 days before Christmas, Owen called Adrian's office. He agreed to meet the following morning at a diner near the airport, where planes passed low enough to make the sugar packets tremble in their holder. Adrian sat beside me in the booth. Owen chose the seat facing the entrance and kept both hands around a coffee he never drank. I performed the reset, Owen said before the waitress had cleared the table. Who requested it? Adrian asked. Briar Calloway. I watched him closely. Tell us exactly what she said. Owen explained that Briar had called NetAccess shortly after 6 on an August evening. She said I had lost my token during travel and needed emergency access before the next morning's payroll review. Because she was ClearPath's chief operating officer and listed as an executive administrator, Owen accepted her approval. Did you contact me? I asked. No, because she said you were on a flight and the delay could affect payroll. Why did the ticket say routine maintenance when I asked about it? I did not write that. Owen finally lifted the coffee, then set it down without drinking. The cup left a wet ring beneath his thumb. The original ticket was closed after the reset, he continued. 2 days later, someone with executive permissions reopened it, changed the summary, and removed the note identifying Miss Calloway's office. Did you retain the company log? I asked. NetAccess stores a locked archive automatically. I did not copy it. I wrote down the ticket number and the times because I thought I would be blamed if the issue returned. Why did you resign? Your access was used again, and management told us not to discuss it outside the executive team. Then I saw the transfer alert. I knew the reset I processed had made it possible. His voice thinned on the last sentence. I did not transfer money, he said, but I opened the door. Adrian placed a legal pad on the table. We are not asking you to hand over data you do not own. We need a declaration about what you did, what you observed, and where NetAccess keeps the archive. Owen nodded, though his fingers remained locked around the coffee cup. What happens to me? He asked. That depends on whether you tell the truth completely, Adrian said. Right now, the best thing you can do is preserve your notes and stop guessing about everyone else's evidence. For weeks, I had pictured Owen as the person hiding behind my credential. The man across from me looked less like a conspirator than an employee who had followed an urgent order and understood too late what that order had enabled. He had made a serious mistake. So had I, though mine was different. I had treated him as a missing piece of proof, before considering that he might be a person trying not to drown in someone else's plan. Adrian sent Owen's declaration and our preservation request to Marjorie Sloan, chair of ClearPath's audit committee. Marjorie did not endorse my allegations or contact me directly. She issued a narrow instruction requiring NetAccess to preserve and produce the original ticket history for independent review. That instruction was enough to open the archive. 3 days after Christmas, Adrian called me into his office. Owen was already there, seated beside a laptop. A NetAccess certification lay on the table with the custodian's declaration, export details, and a digital hash confirming the archive had not been altered after collection. The record showed the token reset at 6:42 in the evening. It showed the replacement credential activated from Executive Workstation 4 inside Briar's office. Later edits had changed the ticket summary, but the archive preserved every version. This does not prove Briar was sitting at the computer, Adrian said. Someone with access to her office could have activated it. It proves I did not activate it from Raleigh. That part is established. It also proves the company's summary omitted evidence that cleared me. It proves their summary was incomplete. We will establish intent through the full record. I wanted to send the export to every relative who had discussed my supposed treatment. I wanted to place it beneath Mom's empty chair photograph and ask whether the family was healing yet. Adrian turned the laptop toward me. Do you want to win a group text? He asked. Or do you want this record authenticated before they have a chance to explain it away? I looked at Owen's declaration, the custodian's signature, and the hash printed beneath the export number. A screenshot could be called fake. A forwarded email could be stripped of context. This came from the company that owned the system, under a preservation instruction from ClearPath's own audit committee. Authenticate everything before we use it, I said. Owen scrolled to the original request embedded in the certified ticket. The sender field carried Briar's corporate address. Her first message claimed I had misplaced my device and needed emergency access for payroll. A second note appeared beneath it, sent 4 minutes later. Do not copy Tessa. I am handling her access personally. Breyer's sentence sat at the bottom of the certified ticket, plain enough to fit on one line and damaging enough to change the shape of the entire case. Adrian did not let me touch the laptop again until Owen had finished his declaration. The process took most of the morning. Owen identified the ticket number, described the request he received, explained the reset procedure, and confirmed that the archive displayed every later edit without replacing the original version. A NetAccess records custodian had already certified the export and the digital hash attached to it. I had spent months wanting one clean piece of proof. Now that it lay in front of me, Adrian treated it like something fragile. A forwarded email is a claim, he said. A screenshot is a claim. This has a source, a custodian, a timestamp, and a witness who can explain the system. And Breyer's name. Yes, but do not skip ahead. The ticket proves she requested the reset and ordered NetAccess not to notify you. The device log proves the replacement credential was activated from her office. We still need the transaction history, workstation access, and the reason she wanted control of your account. She told Owen it was for payroll. She lied about why you could not authorize the request yourself. That matters. It does not yet prove where every dollar went. Owen signed the declaration with his own pen. His hand shook slightly near the final page, and I watched him press harder to keep the signature steady. I should have called you, he said. You should have, I replied. He looked down. The silence stretched until I added, but you came here now, and you preserved enough for the truth to be checked. I did not tell him it was all right. It was not. His mistake had helped someone enter a system under my name. Still, reducing him to the worst decision of his career would have made me no better at reading people than my family had been at reading me. After Owen left, Adrian placed the declaration in a red folder and locked the original certified export in the firm's evidence cabinet. What happens next? I asked. We give the board enough to act without giving Vincent a map of everything we have. My first instinct was to send Marjorie Quinn every claim, email, schedule, and invoice I had collected. Adrian stopped me before the draft attachment passed 100 pages. She chairs an audit committee, he said. She is not applying for a second job as your investigator. The detail proves the pattern. The detail can also hide the point. We cut the package to 12 pages. The first page contained a timeline. The second listed 3 things that could not all be true. I could not have approved a transfer from Charlotte while speaking continuously on a recorded panel in Raleigh. NetAccess could not have performed routine maintenance when Breyer requested emergency access in my name. And ClearPath could not claim I concealed concerns that I had documented before the transfers became visible. Behind those pages, we included the certified ticket excerpt, my refusal email, the Raleigh records, and a request that the audit committee preserve the full vendor tracker, board materials, authentication archive, and every version of the transaction certification. I expected Marjorie to call me that afternoon. She did not. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th morning, Adrian received a letter from outside counsel retained by ClearPath's audit committee. It did not accuse anyone, confirm wrongdoing, or promise that I would be restored to my position. It directed NetAccess and ClearPath to preserve authentication records, vendor files, board communications, and transaction documents pending an independent review. A second paragraph asked why my written refusal to sign the compliance certification had not appeared in the materials previously supplied to the board. I read that sentence twice. Marjorie had not taken my side. She had noticed that someone had removed my side before the board could see it. Later that week, she agreed to speak with Adrian and me by video conference. Marjorie appeared from a wood-paneled office with reading glasses resting low on her nose. Her silver hair was pulled back, and she wasted no time on greetings beyond what courtesy required. I received a board package in August, stating that Miss Calloway had failed to disclose internal deficiencies until after fund transfers were questioned, Marjorie said. Your email indicates she raised the billing issue before those transfers were presented to the board. That is correct, Adrian replied. Why was the refusal email not included? I cannot answer for the person who assembled the board package. Marjorie looked at me. Can you prove delivery? I gave her the server confirmation, recipient list, and reply from my father. Her eyes moved across the screen. Mr. Calloway responded within 11 minutes. Yes. A few pages rustled on her desk. There is also a reference in our August materials to a vendor tracking appendix, she said. The appendix is not attached to the version in the board portal. Breyer mentioned a vendor tracker in an email, I replied. I could never locate it on the shared drive. What did the email say? That she would clean the vendor side and reroute support expenses before due diligence saw the variance. Marjorie removed her glasses. You did not include that quotation in your 12-page package. We included only what could be authenticated without exposing the full review. For the first time, something close to approval crossed her face. Good, she said. Do not send the missing material directly to board members. Outside counsel will arrange production. The call ended after 28 minutes. I closed the laptop and sat back, listening to the heat click inside my condo's wall vents. For years, I had brought people every number because I believed removing a detail weakened the truth. Marjorie had understood more from 3 impossible facts than my family had admitted after months of spreadsheets. The truth had never been too weak. I had been placing it in rooms where no one intended to hear it. On Tuesday, January 7th, ClearPath employees received a company-wide announcement at 8 in the morning. 10 minutes later, the Charlotte Business Journal published the same news. Harborbridge Health Partners had signed a definitive agreement to acquire ClearPath Recovery Holdings in a transaction valued at $80 million. The article included a photograph of Dad standing inside our first treatment center. He wore a dark suit, one hand resting against a wall covered with patient recovery messages. The caption called him a founder who had turned personal loss into a regional care network. The purchase price was enterprise value, not a check written directly to him. ClearPath still carried about $26 million in senior debt, along with transaction expenses and working capital adjustments. Even after those deductions, Dad expected to receive somewhere near $20 million for his shares. Breyer would remain with Harborbridge as regional operations leader. Her photograph appeared below Dad's. She wore a navy dress and the confident smile she used at charity dinners, her engagement ring visible against one wrist. The agreement had not appeared overnight. Harborbridge had been conducting due diligence for nearly 6 months, which meant Dad's request for my certification had arrived when buyer questions were already moving through the company. My suspension had followed when I refused to make the file clean. The missing vendor tracker, the altered board package, and the story about my supposed theft all pointed toward the same deadline. They had not needed me discredited forever. They had needed me discredited until February 14th. At 11:20 that morning, Dad called my personal phone. I let it ring twice before answering. Tessa, he said, with the warm tone he once used when calling from the airport after a successful conference. I assume you saw the announcement. I did. It is a good outcome for ClearPath. Harborbridge has the capital to keep every center stable. What do you need? A soft breath came through the line. Must every conversation begin that way? Our last family conversation ended with you asking me to repay money I did not take. We were acting on the information available then. You had my Raleigh records. We had conflicting information. You also had my refusal email, but the board did not. Dad paused. Somewhere near him, a door shut, and voices faded. I did not call to relitigate the past, he said. Breyer's wedding is in a little over 5 weeks. Your mother wants the family together. Does Breyer? She wants peace. That is not what I asked. His voice tightened, though the warmth remained polished around the edges. There are a few employment documents left from your departure. A release, confirmation that you returned company property, and limited cooperation if Harborbridge has questions about old files. Nothing unreasonable. Send them to Adrian. This does not require lawyers. You threatened to refer me to police unless I signed the last document. I offered you protection before the situation became public. The situation became public because you described me as unstable and dishonest. No one outside this family knows what happened. The board does. He ignored that. You have always been the rational one, Dad continued. Breyer should not have to spend her wedding wondering whether her sister plans to create a scene. Sign the clean exit documents, attend the ceremony, and let us move forward. The phrase clean exit stayed with me. He still believed my power began and ended with an employment dispute. Dad did not know I had filed a protected report. He did not know Harbor Bridge's special counsel had begun asking about the compliance officer who refused to certify the file. He thought he needed my silence. He had not yet learned that the transaction needed my words. "I will review anything sent through counsel," I said. "You could save everyone a great deal of expense by handling this as family." Family did not reset my credential. Breyer did. The line remained quiet for several seconds. "That ticket does not mean what you think it means," Dad said. "What does it mean? We will discuss it when you are ready to be reasonable." He ended the call without saying goodbye. That evening, Mom arrived at my condo carrying a covered casserole dish and a grocery bag filled with things I had not asked for. She brought chicken pie from a bakery near her church, 2 jars of preserves, and the brand of tea my grandmother used to keep in a blue tin. The food was not an apology. It was how Mom entered rooms where words had become dangerous. "I thought you might be working late," she said. "I work from here." Her gaze moved toward the second bedroom, where a folding table held my laptop and client files. Nothing in the condo suggested collapse. The furniture was the same, the mortgage was current. My car still ran, yet Mom examined the room as if she expected unpaid bills to be stacked beneath the lamps. "I saw the Harbor Bridge announcement," I said. "Your father worked very hard for that company." "So did I." "I know. Did you know Breyer requested access in my name?" Mom set the casserole on the kitchen counter. The glass dish made a dull sound against the granite. "I do not understand those systems." That was not my question. She began removing groceries from the bag. Tea, preserves, crackers. Each item received more attention than it needed. "Your sister says she was trying to keep payroll from being delayed," Mom said. "I was not on a flight. She could have called me. Maybe she thought you would refuse. She told NetAccess not to notify me." Mom's fingers stopped around the tea tin. "Dad asked me to sign a clean exit agreement," I continued. "He wants me at the wedding as long as I make the company safe first. He wants the family together. He wants a photograph of the family together." Her shoulders lowered. "Tessa, I do not know everything that happened. But you know something." The refrigerator hummed behind us. Outside, tires moved over wet pavement, and water clicked through the gutter above my balcony. Mom turned toward the living room. "There were reports when I still helped with the monthly packets. Your father told me they were temporary variances from expansion." "What reports?" I said I do not know enough to explain them. "Where are they?" She pressed both hands against the back of a dining chair. "I came here to bring you dinner, and I am not going to pretend dinner makes framing me a misunderstanding." Her mouth trembled once before she controlled it. "I never said you stole anything. You sat in the room while Dad asked me to repay it. I was afraid of what would happen if the company failed. So was I. That is why I reported the billing." Mom looked toward the casserole dish, then back at me. "I do not want to choose between my husband and my daughters. That choice was made when you watched one daughter accuse the other and decided silence was neutral." She flinched, but I did not take the words back. Nor did I ask her to stay. "When you are ready to tell the truth, call me," I said. "Until then, please do not bring food here and call it peace." Mom gathered her empty grocery bag. At the door, she turned as if she might speak. But whatever she had carried into my condo stayed behind her teeth. The casserole remained on my counter after she left. I put it in the refrigerator because throwing it away would have been theater, and eating it that night would have felt like surrender. 3 days later, Adrian called to say Harbor Bridge's special counsel wanted a limited disclosure conference. Her name was Nora Vance. We met by secure video with Adrian beside me and Nora in a conference room somewhere outside Atlanta. She spoke in short, exact sentences and did not pretend Harbor Bridge was investigating ClearPath out of charity. "Our client has been informed that a former executive filed protected reports involving billing practices and retaliation," Nora said. "Miss Calloway's identity has not been disclosed to the seller." "Vincent and Breyer do not know?" I asked. "Not through Harbor Bridge." "What does the buyer need from me?" 3 separate things must be completed before closing. First, a limited settlement of your employment and retaliation claims. Second, certification from an independent monitor that agreed remediation steps have been completed. Third, a seller representation that no new violation has occurred, supported by adequate restitution funds in escrow. I wrote the 3 items down. My signature applies only to the first condition? and to statements concerning allegations within your personal knowledge, Nora said. You will not certify ClearPath's current operations. That belongs to the seller and the monitor. What happens if I refuse? That depends on why. If your personal claim remains unresolved, Harbor Bridge may waive the condition, renegotiate, or terminate. If the monitor cannot certify remediation, or if the seller representation is false, termination becomes much more likely. What happens to the patients? Nora's expression did not change. Harbor Bridge is not obligated to operate assets it does not acquire. That was not the question. No, she said. It was the answer our agreement permits me to give. Adrian leaned forward. Are the centers in immediate danger of closure? Some facilities are profitable. Others depend on shared cash. If the transaction fails, the lender may force asset sales or tighter oversight. Continuity planning would depend on the board, the lender, and state regulators. There it was. The part Dad had used as a weapon contained enough truth to hurt. If the deal died, he would lose money and control. Briar would lose her promised position. But employees who had never touched a false claim could also lose hours, and patients in the middle of treatment could wake up under a new operator or be moved to another facility. Nora sent the first draft that afternoon. The release offered to resolve my retaliation claim without requiring me to admit wrongdoing. It preserved government investigations and excluded patient claims. Several paragraphs were narrow enough to consider. Then I reached the representation section. The sentence required me to confirm that, within the allegations I had reported and based on my personal knowledge through the date of signing, I knew of no violation of the agreed remediation plan. I had been locked out of ClearPath for months. I could confirm what I had reported. I could confirm what records showed before my termination. I could not honestly say that no one had continued the conduct after removing the person who tried to stop it. Harbor Bridge wanted a careful sentence. Vincent wanted a clean exit. Both could use my signature to say the worst was over. I printed the draft, placed Dad's fountain pen beside it, and read the sentence again. The company had already used my credential as a shield once. This time, they wanted me to provide the signature myself. The next morning, Adrian and I rewrote Harbor Bridge's release, one paragraph at a time. We removed any language requiring me to confirm ClearPath's current operations. I had not entered a facility or accessed its systems since September, so my signature could cover only facts within my knowledge, my employment claim, and the conduct I had reported. Then we added conditions of our own. ClearPath had to return the missing patient support fund money to a protected escrow account before closing. An independent monitor would oversee billing and compliance for at least 2 years. Vincent had to leave all operating authority when the sale closed, and Briar could not retain access to billing, vendor approval, or company funds. Harbor Bridge had to preserve licensed clinical staff where patient safety allowed, while undisclosed conduct and future claims remained outside my release. I did not ask for an executive position. I did not ask for a percentage of the sale or a public apology. My settlement demand covered lost salary, legal fees, damage to my professional standing, and terms preventing ClearPath from repeating false claims about my departure. Adrian read the final page twice. You are offering them a path to closing. I'm offering the patients a path through it. And if Vincent refuses to step down, then he is the one choosing the deal over the centers. Harbor Bridge's special counsel responded within a day. Nora Vance agreed to meet by video that Friday, and her first question went directly to Vincent's removal. Your proposal requires Mr. Calloway to surrender operating control at closing, she said. Is that condition intended as personal punishment? It is intended to stop the person who approved the concealment from supervising the correction. You have evidence he approved it? I have his instruction to remove the variance before due diligence, his response to my refusal, and a board package that omitted the email where I warned him. Nora made a note. Harbor Bridge was already planning to replace several senior functions after closing. Several is not the same as Vincent. No, it is not. Adrian moved to the escrow condition. Harbor Bridge would consider requiring repayment of the identified transfers, though Nora resisted placing the entire amount in escrow before the independent review finished. Your client is buying 9 operating licenses, payer contracts, and real estate, I said. They are not buying the right to call missing money an unresolved accounting question. Our client is also assuming the risk of operating facilities whose cash position may worsen before closing. Then the purchase price can reflect that risk. The patient support fund should not. Nora's face remained still, but her answer came more carefully. Harbor Bridge is not purchasing the Calloway family. It is purchasing an operating network. If removing current management protects that network, the buyer will consider it. That sentence should have reassured me. Instead, it clarified what Harbor Bridge valued. The company name, Dad's story about Uncle Daniel, and Breyer's promised leadership meant nothing beside licenses, buildings, insurer agreements, and cash flow. The buyer might remove my father because he had behaved badly, or simply because keeping him had become expensive. Either way, Harbor Bridge wanted the same thing Vincent wanted, a clean transfer with the fewest problems left alive afterward. Nora accepted language preserving government investigations and unknown patient claims. She refused my first version of the staffing condition, saying Harbor Bridge could not promise every job before reviewing qualifications and demand at each center. We narrowed it. The buyer would maintain enough licensed clinical staff to protect continuity of care and would not use the transaction itself as the sole reason to dismiss employees who had no part in the misconduct. It was not perfect. It was more protection than the original agreement offered. By the end of the call, Nora had accepted the monitor in principle, the removal of Vincent from operations, and restrictions on Breyer's financial authority. She still wanted a broader release from me. "We are closer than we were yesterday," Adrian said after the screen went dark. "Closer is not signed." "No. But Vincent leaving management is no longer only your demand. Harbor Bridge is considering it." Dad called that evening and asked me to meet him at the first ClearPath building. The original center had closed for renovation 2 years earlier, though Dad still kept an office upstairs. I found him standing in the empty group room where he had once held family meetings himself. The carpet had been stripped away, leaving pale concrete and dark marks where chairs used to sit. A framed photograph of Uncle Daniel rested on the windowsill. Dad touched the frame as I entered. He was 28 in that picture. "I know. He stayed sober for 11 months after we took it. We thought he had made it." I kept my coat on. The building smelled of plaster dust and old heating vents. "Why did you ask me here?" "Because you speak differently when lawyers are listening. I speak more carefully. You speak as if ClearPath is numbers on a page. I brought frightened parents into this room at 2 a.m. Your mother made coffee in the kitchen because we could not afford overnight staff. People are alive because we kept these doors open. And people were billed for treatment they did not receive." Dad's fingers tightened around the edge of Daniel's frame. "Do you think I ordered that? I think you learned enough to stop it and chose the sale instead." His eyes moved toward me. "Harbor Bridge told Transaction Counsel you are demanding my resignation. I am demanding that the person who hid the problem not control the correction. If the sale fails, the lender will tighten every account we have. Gastonia and Columbia could be sold separately. Staff will leave before they know whether their paychecks are safe. I proposed an interim management plan. You proposed handing my company to strangers. You already agreed to sell it to strangers." Dad set the photograph down. "Do not pretend those are the same thing. They are not. Harbor Bridge pays you. Independent management protects the patients while the records are examined." His voice dropped. "If people lose their jobs because you refuse to sign, you will carry that." I had heard versions of that sentence since childhood. When Dad forgot an anniversary, Mom should have reminded him. When Breyer failed a class, I should have helped more. Whenever a problem reached his door, he found someone nearby and handed over the weight. "I will not carry the consequences of numbers you chose to hide," I said. "Meet the conditions, and I will sign a limited release. Refuse them, and that decision belongs to you. You would remove your own father from the company he built. I am not removing you. I am refusing to protect you from the buyer's decision." Dad turned back toward Daniel's photograph. For a moment, the anger left his shoulders, and he looked like the man who had once driven through the night because a patient's mother had nowhere else to call. Then he said, "Your sister gets married in 3 weeks. Do not ruin that day, too." I left before he could turn her wedding into another debt. Breyer called the following afternoon from her dress fitting. Voices moved around her, accompanied by the soft tearing sound of tissue paper and someone discussing the length of a veil. "Are you coming to the wedding?" she asked. If I still have an invitation. Mom sent it months ago. Dad offered attendance as part of a clean exit. Briar lowered her voice. I want you there. I do not want everyone staring at the empty seat and whispering. Then tell them why it is empty. That is exactly what I mean. Every conversation becomes a hearing with you. I could picture her near the mirrors, one hand holding the phone while a seamstress waited behind her. Dad says you may sign at the reception, Briar continued. Please do it before dinner. I have spent a year planning this, and I do not want lawyers hovering over my wedding. The deadline belongs to the transaction, not me. You could sign earlier, when the conditions are met. You always create conditions no one can satisfy. The sentence sat between us longer than I expected. There were times I spoke to you as if having the right facts meant I had the right to make you feel foolish, I said. I should not have done that. Briar did not answer immediately. When she did, the anger had left her voice. You corrected me in front of everyone. I know. Dad would laugh and you would keep going. I know that too. A woman in the background asked whether Briar wanted the ivory shoes or the white ones. Briar told her to wait. You think admitting that now changes what you are doing? My sister asked. No. It changes what I take responsibility for. It does not make the transfers legal, and it does not make using my credential acceptable. Her breath sharpened. There it is. 1 inch of humanity, then straight back to the case. Because the case is still real. I only requested access because payroll was at risk. You told NetAccess I had lost my token. You would have refused. You did not ask. Briar's voice turned cold. Sign before the reception, Tessa. For once, let one day belong to someone else. The wedding belongs to you. My name does not. She disconnected. On Monday, Adrian called while I was reviewing payroll controls for a consulting client. Grant Mercer contacted me, he said. Briar's fiancé? He is also listed on the wedding production contract. The vendor sent him an updated statement showing a credit from Renewal Family Outreach. My chair rolled back an inch across the floor. How did he know to call you? He saw my name on correspondence connected to your employment dispute. He is not accusing Briar of fraud. He wants to know whether the credit exposes him to a financial obligation that was not disclosed. How much? A little over $30,000. Briar had described Renewal as a company providing family workshops and transportation support. It had no visible employees, no attendance records, and no facility reservations. Now its name appeared on her wedding statement. Do we have the document? I asked. Grant signed an authorization allowing the vendor to provide the statement and explain the credit. We will not contact Renewal's bank or make claims about where the money originated until we have records. Does Briar know he contacted you? I did not ask. The wedding connection was not proof of theft. Renewal could have sponsored an event, repaid a personal loan, or received funds unrelated to ClearPath. Still, the same vendor Briar had offered to clean before due diligence was now paying part of her wedding bill. The distance between company money and white roses had grown very short. Harbor Bridge sent a revised release 2 days later. The narrower language we had negotiated remained on the first pages. Near the end, however, a new paragraph released not only my retaliation claim, but any unknown claim connected to billing, vendor arrangements, corporate reporting, or conduct occurring before closing. Adrian underlined the paragraph. They brought back the broad waiver under a different heading. Nora did not deny it when we called. Harbor Bridge cannot close while a reporting party retains the ability to reopen old issues after the purchase, she said. I am not reopening anything. The issues are still open. The buyer needs finality. So did my father when he asked me to sign a false certification. That comparison is not fair. It is exact. Both sides want my name beneath language saying there is nothing left to discover. Nora's voice cooled. Harbor Bridge can walk away. Then walk away. I will not trade a family lie for a corporate one. Adrian glanced at me, but I had not ended the negotiation. If Vincent refuses the agreed conditions, I continued, the board can prepare an interim operator before closing. That protects continuity while the audit proceeds. If later evidence supports court supervision, the lender or regulator can seek a receiver through the proper process. You are asking the buyer to delay control while another manager operates the assets. I am asking everyone to stop pretending the only choices are signing a lie or closing the centers. Nora agreed to take the proposal back to Harbor Bridge. Shortly after midnight, my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. When I answered, Elaine did not ask whether I was coming to the wedding. She did not mention Dad, forgiveness, or the casserole still sitting untouched in my freezer. Her breathing sounded uneven. "I found the reports I should have given you before they used your name," she said. Mom arrived at my condo shortly after 1 in the morning, carrying a banker's box against her chest. She had not changed out of the clothes she wore to bed. A gray wool coat covered her nightgown, and rain had darkened the shoulders. When I reached for the box, she held it tighter. "I need to tell you what is inside first," she said. "You called me because you found reports. I found them months ago." The hallway light buzzed above us. Somewhere on the floor below, an elevator door opened and shut, but neither of us moved. "Come inside," I said. Mom placed the box on my dining table. The cardboard smelled of dust and the cedar closet at my parents' house. Inside were 12 monthly board packets bound with black clips, their corners softened from handling. Coffee stains marked 2 covers. My mother's handwriting filled the margins in blue ink, circling amounts and adding small questions beside vendor names. She had helped prepare ClearPath's financial packets during its early years, and kept reading them even after the finance department took over. Dad claimed she enjoyed staying involved. I had always thought the habit was harmless. The first packet was dated March of the previous year, 3 months before I found the duplicate therapy claims. A transfer from the Patient Support Fund appeared under Community Outreach expenses. The vendor code belonged to Renewal Family Outreach. Another payment followed in April. Then 2 in May. I turned the pages more quickly. "These began before my review," I said. Mom nodded. "They began before Breyer reset my credential." Another nod. The company had told the board that I discovered billing problems only after money went missing under my access. Their timeline made my investigation look like cover. The paper in front of me showed money had already been leaving the fund before I knew there was anything to hide. A reference number appeared beside each renewal payment. The prefix matched the missing vendor tracker Marjorie had mentioned, though the packet did not include the attachment itself. "Why did you have these?" I asked. "Your father brought the packets home before meetings. Sometimes he asked me to check the totals." "Did he ask you to keep them?" "No." "Did he know you had?" "I do not think so." Mom sat across from me, but her hands stayed in her lap. When the first transfers appeared, Vincent said they were temporary adjustments. He told me Renewal arranged family workshops that could not be billed normally. "Did you see a workshop schedule?" "No." "Attendance record?" "No." "Then what did you see?" Her eyes moved toward the box. Numbers that did not look right. And when I was suspended, I went back through the packets. The refrigerator compressor clicked on behind me. I waited for the rest. "I knew the transfers had started before they blamed you," Mom said. "I told myself your father would correct the record once the sale was secure. Then he said an investigation could close the centers. Breyer's wedding was coming, the bank was already asking questions, and every time I thought about giving you the reports, I pictured the whole family breaking apart. The family had already broken apart. You were deciding who had to stand outside it." Mom closed her eyes for a moment. I kept waiting for the right time. There was no right time. Every day I waited was another choice. Her voice did not shake until the final word. I could have reached across the table. Once, I would have. Comforting my mother had always ended difficult conversations faster than answering them. Instead, I opened the March packet again. "I believe you regret it," I said. "That does not mean I trust you." "I understand." "No, you accept that sentence because you want this moment to end. Understanding comes later." She looked at me then, and whatever answer she had prepared disappeared. I called Adrian before sunrise. By 9, the box was in his office, where each packet was photographed, indexed, and placed in a preservation sleeve. Mom signed a declaration describing when she received the materials, where she stored them, and what Vincent had told her about Renewal. Marjorie's outside counsel arranged for the audit committee's forensic accountant to compare the packets with ClearPath's corporate ledger. I did not receive patient files or private bank records. What came back to Adrian was a limited report based on vendor contracts, payment records, corporate filings, and facility calendars. Renewal had received more than $200,000 over 11 months. Its contract promised weekend family programs, transportation support, and post-discharge workshops. Yet ClearPath could not produce payroll, instructor agreements, attendance sheets, transportation logs, or a single facility reservation under Renewal's name. The registered address belonged to a house in Matthews. Adrian searched the public filing and turned his monitor toward me. The company's organizer was Cassidy Lane. I knew the name before I saw the photograph attached to an old Charity Page article. Cassidy had been Breyer's roommate during her first 2 years of college. She had attended our family Christmas parties, borrowed Mom's jewelry for a formal dance, and spent one summer working in ClearPath's marketing office. She told me Cassidy moved to Nashville, I said. The filing uses a North Carolina address, Adrian replied. We are not assuming that makes the company fraudulent. The audit committee will request proof of services. They will invent it. Perhaps. That is why the original records matter more than whatever appears after the request. The accountant also found repeated references to a vendor appendix with the same prefix printed in Mom's packets. The appendix itself had disappeared from the board portal, but its reference numbers remained in monthly indexes. The missing tracker had left an outline around itself. 2 days later, Grant met Adrian and me at the law office. He looked as if he had slept in his clothes. His wedding was less than 2 weeks away, and until recently, his biggest concern had been whether a February storm might interfere with guests flying into Charlotte. Grant placed a statement from the wedding production company on the conference table. I thought Breyer's father had paid part of the bill as a wedding gift, he said. Then the planner sent this updated balance. A credit of $32,000 appeared under the name Renewal Family Outreach. The description read Event Consulting Reimbursement. Did Breyer explain it? I asked. She said Renewal owed her for private event work she had done. What work? She said she helped them organize donor retreats. Grant rubbed both palms over his face. I asked when. She told me this was not the week to interrogate her. As a named party on the production contract, Grant had signed an authorization allowing Adrian to speak with the vendor about the statement. The company's controller confirmed that Renewal had paid 3 credits over the past 8 months. The first matched the date Breyer placed the deposit on the textile mill venue. The second arrived within a day of her floral contract. The third covered lighting, staging, and part of the catering balance. No private Renewal bank statement was needed. ClearPath's ledger showed money leaving for Renewal. The wedding vendor showed credits arriving from Renewal. Public filings connected Renewal to Breyer's college friend. The chain did not yet prove every dollar was the same dollar. It proved the company Dad called a patient outreach provider had paid my sister's wedding bills while producing no evidence that it served patients. Grant stared at the statement. Was she ever going to tell me? I cannot answer that. Did she know where the money came from? I cannot answer that either. He gave a short laugh without humor. You sound like your attorney. I am trying not to accuse someone beyond what the records prove. That is generous. No, it is necessary. Grant signed a declaration confirming how he received the statement, what Breyer told him, and that he had authorized the vendor to provide its correspondence. He did not confront her that day. Adrian advised him to protect his own financial records, stop making new payments from joint funds, and hire separate counsel before taking further action. By the end of the week, the audit committee's accountant found one more entry in ClearPath's accounts payable schedule. A final payment to Renewal had been released after Harbor Bridge began its remediation review. The amount matched the unpaid credit still listed on the wedding production statement, less a small processing fee. That changed everything. The earlier transfers might be described as old conduct under review. A new payment meant the conduct had continued, while Vincent was preparing to represent that it had stopped. The independent monitor could not certify remediation if money was still moving through the same vendor. Adrian sent a legal hold notice covering the latest payment and informed the monitor through outside counsel. We did not call Dad. We did not warn Breyer. Giving them a chance to rewrite another explanation before the records were preserved would have served no one. Mom remained in Adrian's conference room after signing her declaration. Will this send Vincent to prison? She asked. I do not know, Adrian said. This is evidence for the audit and the investigation. Charging decisions belong to the government. She turned toward me. Do you want him to go? I want the records to stop changing, depending on who asks. That was not what I meant. I know. Adrian left us alone. Mom's coat lay folded over the back of a chair. Without it, she looked smaller than she had at my dining table, though I knew better than to confuse smallness with innocence. "Is there any place for me in your life after this?" she asked. "There may be." Her breath caught. "But you do not earn it by handing over one box," I continued. "When the board asks, you tell the truth. When investigators ask, you tell the truth. You do not soften it because Dad looks frightened, and you do not ask me to make your testimony easier to live with. I will tell them. And if Breyer blames you, I will still tell them." I slid one packet toward Adrian's empty chair. Mom's blue handwriting circled Renewal's first payment, followed by a question she had written nearly a year earlier. What service was provided? I kept the packet because it was evidence, not because her handwriting made me miss her. The morning before the wedding, Grant forwarded a notice from the production company. Renewal's final credit was scheduled to post the following morning, the same day Dad expected me to sign the release and Harbor Bridge expected to close before 5. I sent the notice to Adrian and read it once more. "Then they are planning to make me certify a lie while they are still spending it," I said. 3 days before Breyer's wedding, Harbor Bridge gave me until Thursday afternoon to decide whether I would sign. Nora Vance appeared on the secure video call with 2 attorneys beside her and a stack of documents arranged in front of them. Adrian sat at my right. Across town, Marjorie joined from the office of the Audit Committee's outside counsel. The independent monitor cannot certify remediation while the renewal payment remains unresolved. Nora said, "If the payment represents new misuse of company funds, the seller's no new violation statement will also fail." "And if it has not posted yet?" I asked. "Harbor Bridge can keep the transaction open until the deadline while the source is verified." "You still want my release?" "Our client wants every closing condition completed." The latest draft in front of me was narrower than the one we had rejected. It resolved my employment and retaliation claims, preserved government investigations, excluded unknown patient claims, and limited my factual statement to the conduct I had personally reported. The language no longer asked me to bless ClearPath's current operations. Under different circumstances, I could have signed it. That was what made the decision harder. Dad and Breyer had not handed me a document with the word "lie" printed across the top. They had brought the agreement close enough to honesty that refusing it could be described as spite. "What happens if Harbor Bridge walks away?" I asked. Nora folded her hands. "The purchase agreement terminates. Escrow returns to the buyer, subject to transaction expenses and any dispute over seller representations. That is the transaction. What happens to the centers? Harbor Bridge would have no authority over them. Would your client support an independent operator while the board and lender decide what comes next?" One of the attorneys beside Nora looked toward her. She did not return the glance. "Harbor Bridge will not assume operating responsibility before owning the assets," she said. I did not ask them to assume responsibility. I asked whether they would oppose a temporary operator appointed by the board. Our client would review any proposal presented through proper channels. It was not an answer, though it was less of a refusal than the one she had given the week before. Nora turned a page. "Miss Calloway, the buyer has already funded escrow. Transaction counsel, lender counsel, and regulatory teams will be available until the 5 o'clock deadline on Friday. We need to know whether your condition can be satisfied. My condition is not the only one at risk." "No," Nora said. "It is the only one you control." The sentence followed me after the call ended. Dad wanted me to believe I controlled every paycheck at ClearPath. Harbor Bridge wanted me to believe I controlled whether their purchase closed. Both versions placed the entire weight on the woman asked to sign, while the people who created the problem stood behind her and waited. Adrian closed his laptop. "She is right about one thing. Your release belongs to you. And the rest does not. The seller representation belongs to Vincent. The monitor certification belongs to the monitor. The continuity plan belongs to the board, lender, and regulators. So we make them use what belongs to them." That afternoon, we met with Marjorie and the Audit Committee's outside counsel in a conference room near Uptown Charlotte. Elaine joined by video from Adrian's office, where a paralegal had arranged for her declaration to be witnessed. Owen appeared from a NetAccess conference room with the company's records custodian beside him. For the first time since the duplicate claims appeared, I was not the only person holding a piece of the truth. Owen confirmed the reset ticket and the device activation records. Elaine identified the monthly packets and described where Adrian explained the protected report, my retaliation claim, and the limits of the release. Marjorie's accountant summarized Renewal's missing service records and the payment trail supported by ClearPath's ledger and Grant's wedding statement. No one declared the case finished. Each person said only what the documents allowed. When Owen completed his statement, Marjorie removed her glasses and placed them beside her notes. If closing fails, the board will need to act before the lender acts for us, she said. Vincent controls only 3 votes with Breyer, I replied. He may persuade one of the long-term directors that suspension will frighten staff. Then show them the continuity plan before he shows them panic. Marjorie looked toward her outside counsel. What can we do under the bylaws without a court order? The attorney opened a bound copy of ClearPath's governing documents. A majority can suspend officers for material misconduct, restrict access to financial systems, and appoint an interim operator. The board cannot appoint a receiver. That requires a petition and judicial order. How fast can an interim operator take control? Marjorie asked. If the resolution is prepared in advance, immediately after the vote, banking authority and payer notices may take longer, but system access and executive authority can be transferred the same day. And the receiver? I asked. The lender could petition after a covenant default. A licensing regulator could support continuity conditions. There would still be a hearing. No one promised the centers would pass through the next months without disruption. Some vendors might demand quicker payment. Employees might resign. The lender could impose limits that made every decision harder. But hard was not the same as impossible. I slid a short proposal across the table. If the sale failed, Marjorie would call an emergency board meeting. The resolution would suspend Vincent and Breyer, appoint an experienced behavioral health operator on an interim basis, preserve payroll and patient care accounts, and restrict payments unrelated to direct operations. The board would notify lenders and regulators, then cooperate with any later petition for court supervision. This protects the centers without protecting the people who cause the risk, I said. One of Ridgewell's representatives had already indicated through Marjorie that the fund would support interim management if the latest renewal payment was confirmed. The 2 independent directors wanted written proof before committing. Marjorie read the proposal to the final line. You came prepared to stop the sale, she said. No. I came prepared in case the people asking for my signature had not stopped the conduct. And if the final payment does not post, then the monitor reviews the evidence already available. If the conditions are truly met, I sign the narrow release. Adrian looked at me, though he already knew my answer. I had not brought them a trap. I had brought them 2 honest outcomes. Marjorie signed an instruction authorizing outside counsel to draft the emergency resolution. She did not promise the votes, but she agreed to call the meeting if the closing conditions failed. The truth had finally reached a room with people who could act on it. Breyer called that night. The number appeared while I was arranging the final documents on my dining table. For several seconds, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Mom says you are still coming, Breyer said. I plan to attend the ceremony. And the reception? Yes, her breath released slowly. Dad says the papers can be signed before dinner. We could get it over with and have one normal evening. There is still an unresolved payment. Renewal again? The speed of her answer told me she knew exactly which payment I meant. Yes. Cassidy handled that company. I did not manage every invoice. Renewal paid credits toward your wedding. She owed me for work. What work? I helped with donor events. Where were they held? A pause opened between us. You are doing it again, Breyer said, turning a conversation into an interrogation. I am asking what service Renewal paid you for. I do not owe you my personal contracts. ClearPath paid Renewal from a fund intended for patients. Then ask ClearPath. I did. The company could not produce attendance records, payroll, or facility reservations. Her voice sharpened. You have spent months trying to make everything sound criminal. Did you request the emergency reset of my token? That has already been explained. Not to me. You were refusing to cooperate, and payroll needed approval. Did you request it? The silence lasted long enough for me to hear movement on her side of the call. A drawer opened. Something wooden slid shut. You always make everything sound unforgivable, she said. Some choices are not softened by the way we describe them. I did not steal your life, Tessa. You had a career. You had Dad's trust. You had the office, the title, and every room stopped when you started talking. I wanted one thing that belonged to me. Which thing? My wedding, my position. One day when I was not standing beside the daughter who knew better. You could have had all of that without using my name. You do not know what it is like to spend your whole life being corrected. I know I did that to you. I already told you I was wrong. But you still get to be the good one. No, I get to be responsible for my choices. So do you. Breyer's voice softened. Dad said after the sale, we could start over. Harbor Bridge would take operations. You would get a settlement. I would move into the new role. We could put this behind us. Putting something behind us requires telling the truth about what it was. This family will never survive the way you want to tell it. The family did not survive the way Dad wanted to hide it. A woman called Breyer's name in the background, asking whether the welcome bags had arrived. I have to go, my sister said. Did you request the reset? She ended the call. On Thursday evening, Adrian brought the final folder to my condo. The cover was dark blue, plain enough to look like any other closing packet. Inside, every document had a purpose. The executive summary contained no patient names. The limited disclosure letter identified me as the reporting party known to Harbor Bridge's special counsel. Behind it sat the unsigned release, the closing condition timeline, the certified net access excerpt, Elaine's declaration summary, and the evidence showing that Renewal had continued receiving company funds after remediation began. The final tab remained empty. That is where the payment confirmation goes if Grant receives it, Adrian said. And if he does not? You decide based on the evidence available. The monitor decides whether to certify. Vincent decides whether to sign the seller representation. Nora decides what Harbor Bridge does at 5. I opened my purse and removed Dad's fountain pen. Under the kitchen light, the engraving had faded to a pale line along the barrel. Do the right thing, even when it costs us. I was prepared to use this, I said. I know. If the money had been restored, the monitor had certified the plan, and Vincent had accepted removal from operations, I would have signed. That is why the empty signature line matters. I placed the pen across the folder and closed the cover. My arrangements for Friday were simple. I would drive myself to the textile mill, leave my car where no valet could block it, and return home rather than stay at the family hotel. Adrian had the venue address, my arrival time, and the closing schedule. I would not drink. The originals remained with his office, while my folder held authenticated copies and summaries suitable for disclosure. There would be no slideshow, no patient records on a wedding screen, and no speech designed to turn private treatment into entertainment. Dad had chosen the reception as a pressure point. I intended to use it only as the place where he expected my signature. Friday morning arrived cold and bright. Charlotte had no snow, but frost silvered the roofs across my courtyard, and the sunlight made the bare trees look sharper than usual. At 8:23, Grant forwarded an email to Adrian. The wedding production company confirmed that Renewal Family Outreach's final credit had posted that morning. The amount matched the last ClearPath accounts payable release identified by the audit committee's accountant, minus the vendor's processing charge. The email had gone to both Grant and Breyer. She knew the payment had cleared. At 9, the independent monitor informed Harbor Bridge that remediation could not be certified. Shortly afterward, Marjorie's counsel circulated the draft emergency board resolution to the directors, marked for use only if closing failed. At 10:15, Adrian sent the evidence package to Nora, Marjorie, and the monitor through the secure channel they had agreed upon. I signed nothing. Nora called before noon. Harbor Bridge's termination notice is prepared, she said. Buyer counsel will hold it until the deadline, or until formal confirmation that the closing conditions cannot be satisfied. The monitor already refused certification. The seller still has an opportunity to address the condition. How does Vincent address a payment that cleared this morning? That is a question for seller's counsel. Her answer told me Harbor Bridge had stopped expecting a cure. They were completing the procedure. At 2, I dressed in a dark blue silk gown that covered my shoulders and reached below my knees. No bridal white. No black meant to suggest mourning. Nothing chosen to provoke a photograph. The folder went into a leather bag. Dad's pen stayed in my hand for a moment before I placed it across the cover. At 2:40, I drove toward the old textile mill. Traffic moved steadily through Charlotte, past brick warehouses, glass offices, and bare trees strung with Valentine decorations. By the time I parked, wedding guests were already entering beneath white lights and winter greenery. I attended the ceremony from the third row on the bride's side. Briar walked down the aisle holding Dad's arm, her veil trailing behind her across the wood floor. For a few minutes, she was only my younger sister, the girl who once climbed into my bed during thunderstorms and complained that I took up too much space. Grant looked at her as if the statement from the wedding vendor were not folded inside his attorney's file. Maybe he had decided to give her the ceremony before asking what came after it. At 4:30, the reception doors opened. Music filled the room, champagne moved across silver trays, and guests gathered beneath the amber lights. My folder remained beneath the table. At 4:50, the band lowered its volume. Dad rose with a glass in his hand and tapped a spoon against the rim. "To our successful daughter," Vincent said, smiling toward Briar, "and her unemployed sister." Laughter moved through the room. Under the table, I placed my hand on the folder. The laughter did not fill the room all at once. It moved from table to table, light and uncertain at first, then louder when people saw my father smiling. A man near the stage laughed hard enough to slap the table. Several ClearPath executives joined him. Other guests looked down at their plates or lifted their glasses without drinking. My mother sat perfectly still, both hands wrapped around the stem of her water glass. Grant did not laugh. He glanced at Briar, but my sister gave him a bright smile, the kind meant to tell a room that nothing uncomfortable had happened. Then she leaned toward him and said something I could not hear. Dad kept his glass raised toward me. "Well?" he asked. No response? The clock above the bar showed 4:50. I reached beneath the table, lifted the dark blue folder from my bag, and placed it beside his champagne. Dad looked at the fountain pen lying across the cover, and satisfaction softened his face. "There she is," he said. "I knew my sensible daughter would come through." The guests nearest us quieted. They did not know what the folder contained, but they understood from his tone that they were being invited to witness something private. Dad opened the cover. The executive summary came first. It stated that a new payment connected to Renewal Family Outreach had posted that morning, after remediation had supposedly begun. It also stated that the independent monitor could not certify completion, while the payment remained unresolved. His smile lasted through the first paragraph. Then he reached the limited disclosure letter. The page identified me as the reporting party, whose allegations had been reviewed by Harbor Bridge's special counsel during due diligence. It was not a government document, and it did not describe patient records. It confirmed only that the buyer had known of my protected report, while Vincent continued telling the board I was a disgruntled former employee trying to hide theft. Dad's thumb stopped against the paper. He read the page again, slower this time. Briar leaned across the table. "What is it?" Vincent ignored her. His eyes moved to the unsigned release, then to the blank signature line on the final page. His hand froze. "This was you?" he asked. The room was quiet enough that the microphone near the bandstand carried his voice beyond our table. I rested my fingertips on the pen. "The report was mine," I said. "The fraud was not." Dad closed the folder halfway and lowered his voice. "Sign it. The monitor refused certification this morning. We can fix that Monday. The closing deadline is today. Then sign your release and let transaction counsel handle the rest." My release is not a statement that the conduct stopped. His eyes sharpened. Hundreds of people depend on those centers. I gave the board a continuity plan. You gave strangers permission to take over my company. The audit committee has an emergency resolution ready. If closing fails, the board can suspend current management and appoint an interim operator. For the first time that afternoon, Dad looked past me toward Marjorie Sloan. She sat 2 tables away beside one of ClearPath's independent directors. Neither woman touched her champagne. Marjorie met his stare without moving. Dad turned back to me. "You went around me. I built a path that does not require you." The words landed more quietly than his toast had, but the color rose along his neck. "You have no idea what you are doing," he said. "The lender will tighten every account. Vendors will panic. Employees will quit. Patients will be transferred because you wanted to prove a point. I was prepared to sign a limited release if the money was restored. The monitor certified the correction, and you accepted removal from operations." His hand tightened on the folder. "The conditions were not met," I continued. Renewal paid the wedding vendor again this morning. Briar's chair shifted against the floor. That has nothing to do with ClearPath, she said. Grant turned toward her. Renewal paid the production company. It was a private credit. From a patient outreach company? Her mouth opened, then closed. Dad pushed the folder toward me. Sign first. We will investigate the payment after closing. That was the choice he had offered from the beginning. Give him the signature now. Trust him to find the truth later. After the money arrived and my usefulness ended, I picked up the fountain pen. For a fraction of a second, Dad's shoulders loosened. Then I placed the pen inside my bag. Not anymore, I said. At 4:53, my phone vibrated against the table. Adrian's email contained the formal notice we had prepared. It stated that I would not execute the limited release because the agreed conditions had not been satisfied. Attached was the wedding vendor's confirmation that Renewal's final credit had posted that morning. I forwarded the notice through the secure closing channel and copied Nora, the monitor, Marjorie's counsel, and Sellers' counsel. Dad's phone began ringing almost immediately. He rejected the first call. It rang again. Answer it, I said. He stood and stepped away from the table, carrying the folder with him. Guests watched as he crossed toward the windows. His attorney's voice was too faint for me to hear, but Dad's replies traveled clearly across the room. No, she has not signed. A pause followed. The payment is being reviewed. Another pause. You do not have authority to terminate before the deadline. His back straightened. Across the room, Marjorie rose from her chair. The two independent directors followed. One checked her phone, then gathered her purse. Briar caught my wrist beneath the table. What did you send? She asked. The truth available as of this morning. You planned this. I planned for both outcomes. You came here to destroy my wedding. I came here prepared to sign if the conditions were met. Her grip tightened. No one will believe that. Grant looked down at her hand around my wrist. Let go of her, he said. Briar released me and turned toward him. She has spent months trying to punish us. Grant did not answer. His attention had moved to the open folder Dad had left on the window ledge. At 4:58, Vincent's phone rang again. This time, he listened without interrupting. The band had stopped playing. No one had asked them to, but the musicians had understood that continuing would sound absurd. Dad turned slowly toward the room. What do you mean it has been delivered? He asked. His attorney spoke for several seconds. The outside date is 5, Dad said. It is not 5 yet. Another pause followed. His face changed before he lowered the phone. The closing condition had failed. The monitor would not issue the required certification. Sellers' counsel could not provide a truthful no new violation representation. And my release remained unsigned. Harbor Bridge had not completed a new investigation in 5 minutes. Their lawyers had only sent the termination notice already prepared for that outcome. Dad stared at the screen. What happened? Briar asked. He looked at her as though he had forgotten she was wearing a wedding dress. The transaction is terminated. A murmur spread through the reception. The guests did not know about claim codes, token archives, or board packets. What they understood was simpler. Vincent Calloway had entered the room expecting an $80 million sale and lost it before the champagne warmed in his glass. Marjorie approached our table. Vincent, the audit committee is calling an emergency board meeting, she said. You and Briar will receive the materials through council. You are doing this now? Dad asked. The center's open tomorrow morning. We are not waiting until Monday to decide who has authority. One of the independent directors stood behind her. Ridgewell's representative was already walking toward the side exit with a phone against his ear. Dad lowered his voice. You cannot suspend me based on allegations presented at a wedding? The resolution is based on records already reviewed by outside counsel, Marjorie replied. The wedding is only where you chose to demand the signature. She turned and left with the other directors. Briar pushed back from the table. This is insane. Renewal was a marketing partner, not some secret account. Grant crossed to the folder and opened the executive summary. His eyes stopped on the vendor name. Why is Renewal listed as receiving money from the Patient Support Fund? He asked. It provided outreach services. And why did that company pay our production vendor? I already told you. It owed me for event work. What event work? Briar looked around the table, aware now that several guests were listening. Donor retreats, she said. Brand planning. Cassidy's records will show it. Elaine stood beside her chair. My mother's voice remained low, but it carried through the silence. I reviewed the monthly packets before the board meetings. I never saw a sponsorship approved for Briar's wedding. Briar turned on her. You do not know everything that happened. No, Mom said. That was the excuse I used for too long. Grant set the summary down. I am leaving the reception, he said. My sister's face went blank. You cannot leave our wedding. The ceremony is over. We have 200 guests. I am calling my bank and my attorney. I will ask them to preserve every record connected to our joint accounts and the wedding contracts. I am not making another financial decision until I know where this money came from. You are humiliating me because Tessa handed you a folder. I saw renewal on the vendor statement before today. Briar glanced toward me. You went to him. Grant came to Adrian after receiving the statement, I said. He authorized the vendor to explain the credit. Her expression tightened. You have been building this behind my back. Grant took his phone from his pocket. I asked you about renewal. You told me I was interrogating you. Because you chose the week of our wedding to question everything. The company chose this morning to pay the final credit. He walked toward the exit without touching her. Briar took one step after him. But Dad's voice stopped her. What exactly did you authorize through renewal? She turned. You knew about renewal, she said. I knew it handled operations expenses. You told me to clean the vendor side before due diligence. I told you to correct irregularities. You told me to reroute support expenses. Dad glanced toward the nearest guests. Lower your voice. Why? You just announced to the room that I was the successful daughter. Tell them what you asked your successful daughter to do. Several people shifted away from the table. Vincent's face hardened. Briar controlled the vendor relationships. She requested the token reset. If she exceeded her authority, the board will address it. My sister stared at him. The speed of his retreat seemed to empty the room around her. You approved every large transfer, she said. I did not approve wedding expenses. You knew the money was covering gaps before closing. I knew you said the services were documented. That is a lie. Dad stepped closer to her. Be careful. Briar laughed once. A dry sound that did not belong with the flowers or white candles. You asked me to make the variance disappear, she said. You said once Harbor Bridge owned the centers, none of it would be our problem. The guests nearest us heard her. So did Elaine. So did Marjorie's outside counsel, who had returned to retrieve a briefcase from the board table. Dad saw him and stopped speaking. That was when the first real truth entered the reception, not because either of them regretted what they had done, but because each had decided the other might be useful as a shield. I put the folder back into my bag. Mom reached toward me. Tessa, I am going home. You should stay until Grant comes back, she said. He does not need me to decide what happens to his marriage. Briar stood beneath the white roses with her veil still pinned perfectly in place. Dad remained near the window, calling one lawyer after another. Neither looked at me as I walked toward the doors. Outside, the February air pressed cold against my face. Music started again inside the mill, softer now, as if someone hoped the reception might continue if the room made enough noise. I reached my car but did not start it. Dad's pen rested inside my bag. I held it across my palm and ran my thumb over the faded engraving. Do the right thing, even when it costs us. For years, I had believed the word us included me. The deal was dead. My name was no longer the easiest explanation for missing money. Yet none of that restored the father who had handed me the pen or the sister who once crawled into my bed during storms. Doing the right thing had stopped them from using me. It had not made losing them painless. My phone rang before I placed the key in the ignition. Adrian spoke as soon as I answered. Briar retained separate counsel. That was fast. Her attorney sent a preservation notice covering Vincent's email, executive communications, and transaction records. They also requested a cooperation discussion. I leaned back against the seat. And Dad? His counsel sent a letter claiming the vendor structure, token reset, and wedding credits were under Briar's authority. Inside the mill, the music continued behind thick brick walls. They are blaming each other, I said. They have started building cases against each other, Adrian replied. By sunrise the morning after the wedding, my father still owned most of ClearPath on paper, but he no longer controlled a keycard, a bank account, or a treatment center. The emergency board meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. I did not attend. Marjorie called Adrian afterward, and I later read the approved minutes through the investigation. By a vote of 5-2, the board suspended Vincent and Breyer from every operating role, disabled their system access, restricted payments unrelated to patient care, and appointed an interim operator who had managed behavioral health facilities through lender disputes before. Dad and Breyer cast the two opposing votes. The resolution did not declare them criminals. It stated that their continued authority posed an unacceptable risk, while the audit committee examined the renewal payments, the altered access ticket, and the missing information from prior board materials. That distinction mattered. The board acted to protect the centers, not to deliver a family verdict. On Saturday morning, the interim operator held calls with facility directors across North Carolina and South Carolina. Payroll accounts remained open. Medication orders continued. Counselors reported for weekend shifts, and patients ate breakfast without knowing that the founder's authority had ended while most of them slept. Not everything stayed calm. 2 vendors demanded quicker payment. A lender froze new capital spending and required daily cash reports. Several employees resigned because they did not trust what would happen next. Still, the doors remained open. Dad had spent months saying only his deal could save ClearPath. The first morning without him proved that the company and the man were not the same thing. Grant moved into a hotel after leaving the reception. He did not return to the house he and Breyer had rented for their marriage. Through his own attorney, he separated their accounts, preserved the wedding contracts, and provided the production company's records to the audit committee. Because they lived in North Carolina, he could not obtain an immediate divorce. They had to live separately for a full year before filing. By the time he filed in February of the following year, their wedding photographs had spent 12 months inside storage boxes neither of them wanted. The marriage ended quietly that summer. Grant did not ask me to testify about Breyer's character. The financial records were enough. In March, the lender petitioned a state court for tighter supervision after ClearPath violated several loan conditions. The board-supported interim operator remained in place while attorneys argued over the next step. After a hearing, the court appointed a receiver with authority over the company's finances, asset sales, and repayment plan. No one arrived with chains for the doors. No patients were pushed onto buses in the middle of the night. The receiver reviewed each center separately, kept the viable facilities open, and arranged transfers only where staffing or finances could not support safe care. Harbor Bridge did not return. A different operator purchased 7 of the centers after months of review. 2 smaller sites were sold to local providers. The buyer retained most licensed clinical employees, accepted continued outside monitoring, and removed the Callaway name from every sign. The first time I drove past the former headquarters and saw the new name above the entrance, I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there for several minutes. I had expected relief. Instead, I remembered Dad lifting me onto his shoulders at the opening of the first center. I remembered Mom serving coffee in paper cups because they could not afford catering. I remembered Breyer at 11 years old, handing out brochures backward because she was too embarrassed to admit she did not understand which side was the front. A company can become evidence. It can also remain a place where true things once happened. Both facts sat beside each other, and neither canceled the other. The forensic audit took nearly 9 months. It confirmed that the replacement credential issued in my name had been activated from Breyer's office. Device records tied several approvals to that workstation. The audit also found that transaction summaries provided to the board had omitted my written warnings and the NetAccess reset history. Renewal Family Outreach had billed ClearPath for services it could not prove it performed. Part of that money paid wedding vendors. Another part covered operating expenses that management did not want shown in their proper categories. The most damaging records did not come from me. A forensic image of Breyer's company laptop recovered a spreadsheet tracking vendor payments, wedding credits, and the retention payment she expected after closing. The file had been deleted, but remained inside a routine cloud backup created before her access was suspended. Another recovered message came from Dad's account. It instructed a senior employee to remove references to Breyer's office from the access history before auditors reviewed it. His lawyers argued that the message concerned formatting, not concealment. That explanation weakened when investigators found a backdated certification and an email in which Dad wrote that the buyer would own the problem once the sale closed. By then, Vincent and Breyer had stopped sharing attorneys. Dad's first defense placed responsibility for renewal, the token reset, and the wedding payments on Breyer. Her attorney answered by providing his instructions, transaction emails, and the location of a paper file he had kept outside the normal board archive. Each believed the other could be traded for mercy. Their cooperation closed gaps the investigators might otherwise have spent years trying to fill. The government did not arrest them at the wedding or the week after. Subpoenas went out over several months. Witnesses were interviewed more than once. Devices were collected through legal process, and financial records moved through accountants before prosecutors decided what they could prove. Early the following year, charges were filed. Breyer entered a plea involving conspiracy, misuse of another person's access credentials, and wire fraud connected to the vendor payments. Her cooperation reduced the penalty she faced, but it did not erase it. She surrendered her role in the industry, agreed to restitution, and accepted a period of incarceration, followed by supervised release. Vincent held out longer. He insisted that every decision had been made to protect patients and employees. The evidence showed that he had once believed that. It also showed the point where keeping the centers open became indistinguishable from preserving his payout, his reputation, and his control. After Breyer agreed to testify, Dad pleaded guilty to wire fraud and obstruction related to the altered records. His sentence included restitution, the loss of assets pledged against ClearPath's debt, and time in federal custody. At his sentencing, I gave a statement because the prosecutor asked whether I wanted the court to hear about the retaliation. I did not describe the empty chair at Thanksgiving or the toast at Breyer's wedding. Those things belonged to our family, damaged as it was. I spoke about the people whose names never appeared in newspaper stories. You used patients as revenue, employees as shields, and me as an alibi, I said. I am not asking the court to punish you for being my father. I am asking the court to consider what happened when the people responsible for care decided that every rule could wait until after they were paid. Dad stared at the table through most of my statement. When the judge called a recess, he looked at me as deputies prepared to lead him away. You destroyed this family, he said. His voice was low, but the courtroom had gone quiet enough for me to hear every word. No, I replied. I stopped caring what you destroyed. That was the last thing I said to him in court. Breyer asked to see me several weeks before she reported to custody. We met in a private conference room at Adrian's office because I would not meet her alone, and she did not want our mother present. Without the styled hair, diamonds, and careful makeup, she looked younger than 32. Her hands stayed folded on the table, one thumb rubbing the pale mark where her wedding ring had been. Dad told me there was only room for one of us, she said. He taught us that. I thought if you were gone, he would finally trust me. He trusted you to do what he did not want attached to his own name. Breyer looked toward the window. He blamed everything on me the moment the deal failed. Yes, I did what he asked. You also did things he did not have to ask twice. Her eyes filled, though the tears did not fall. Do you think I should lose my whole life for this? I think the patients should not have lost money so you could afford the life you wanted. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. She pressed her palms together. Will you ever forgive me? A year earlier, I would have needed to decide whether forgiveness meant excusing her or welcoming her back. By then, I understood that I did not owe either choice to the moment. I hope one day I can remember you without being angry, I said. That is all I can promise. Breyer nodded once. We did not hug when she left. Mom testified before both plea agreements were completed. She described the reports she had kept, the explanations Dad gave her, and the night he asked me to repay money she knew had begun disappearing before my review. After Vincent's sentencing, Elaine moved into a small condo outside Charlotte. The first time we met for coffee, she arrived 20 minutes early and had already ordered the tea I liked. I kept waiting for the right moment to tell the truth, she said. There was only the moment I was afraid, and every day I chose fear again. I believe you are sorry. I am. I am not ready to trust you the way I did before. Her fingers tightened around the paper cup, but she did not ask me to soften the sentence. What can I do? She asked. Tell the truth when no one is rewarding you for it. We began with one phone call a week. Some weeks, I answered. Other times, I let it go to voicemail and called the next day. Healing did not arrive as a family dinner where everyone cried and promised to change. It came in small acts that could be repeated or broken. The receiver and the new operator offered me a senior compliance position after my name was formally cleared. The audit report stated that I had raised the billing concerns before the fund transfers were attributed to me and found no evidence that I had approved or benefited from them. I declined the job. For years, ClearPath had trained me to believe that leaving meant abandoning everyone who remained. Going back would have placed me in the same role with a different name above the entrance. Instead, I continued building my consulting practice. By the summer I am telling you this, I had 6 employees and contracts with treatment centers, outpatient clinics, and community health providers. We helped workers preserve concerns correctly, built reporting systems that did not send every complaint back to the person being accused, and taught boards how to recognize the difference between a difficult employee and an inconvenient truth. On the morning I signed the papers for our new office, Dad's fountain pen was inside a box at the back of my closet. I used an ordinary black pen from the conference table. After everyone left, my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I watched it light up against the quiet room. Then I answered. "Hi, Mom," I said. Outside the windows, Charlotte moved beneath a clear July sky. Cars crossed the intersection, office doors opened, and people carried on with lives that had nothing to do with the Calloway family. The truth had not returned the years we lost. Forgiveness had not erased a sentence, restored a marriage, or rebuilt trust on command. It had done something smaller. It had allowed me to answer the phone without surrendering the life I had built. When someone you love asks you to hide the truth for the sake of the family, remember that silence does not protect a family. It protects the person causing the harm. You do not have to sign a false document, accept blame for someone else's choices, or risk your career just because a parent or sibling says loyalty requires it. Real loyalty never demands that you become an alibi. When you discover wrongdoing, do not react only with anger. Save the emails, record accurate dates, preserve lawful evidence, and speak with a qualified attorney or the proper authority before making public accusations. Facts are strongest when they can be verified by people who have no reason to favor you. You may know the truth, but you still need to present it carefully, build trustworthy allies, and protect innocent people from unnecessary harm. You should also learn the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiving someone does not require you to withdraw evidence, erase consequences, restore access to your life, or pretend the betrayal never happened. You can release your anger while keeping firm boundaries. Trust should return only through honest actions repeated over time, not through tears, apologies, gifts, or promises made after the truth comes out. Most importantly, never confuse saving an organization with saving the people who corrupted it. Sometimes the responsible choice is to remove dishonest leaders, so employees, patients, and families can be protected. You are not destroying a family or business when you stop carrying the damage others created. You are giving the truth room to do its work. If this story reminded you that dignity, evidence, and clear boundaries matter, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more stories about betrayal, justice, and women who finally choose themselves without losing their humanity.